What if everything you've been told about health and healing has been keeping you trapped in a cycle of limitation and suffering? Think about this for a moment. Why is it that some people seem to radiate vitality and wellness effortlessly, while others struggle with chronic conditions despite following every medical protocol, every diet trend, and every wellness routine they can find? Has this ever happened to you? You've tried everything the experts recommend, yet that persistent health challenge keeps returning, leaving you frustrated and searching for answers that seem just out of reach. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. What you're about to discover might surprise you, because the truth about divine health has nothing to do with luck, genetics, or being chosen by some arbitrary force. According to the profound teachings of Emmet Fox, one of the most influential spiritual teachers of the 20th century, health is not a privilege reserved for the fortunate few, nor is it an accident of circumstance. Instead, health operates according to an infallible spiritual law, a law that works with mathematical precision when you understand how to align your thinking with universal truth. But here's where it gets really interesting. When we talk about God's house, we're not referring to any building made of stone or brick, any religious institution you might attend on weekends, or any external structure that requires you to travel somewhere to find healing. Stay with me until the end, because this understanding will completely transform how you approach your own wellness journey. The real temple, the actual house of God, exists within you right now. It's that inner sanctuary, that secret place deep within your soul where divine presence dwells constantly, waiting for you to recognize it. This isn't mystical speculation or wishful thinking. This is practical spiritual science that has been helping people experience profound healing for generations. Most people spend their entire lives looking outward for health solutions, consulting expert after expert, trying method after method, never realizing that the most powerful healing force in existence is already residing within them. They search everywhere except the one place where true transformation actually occurs, in the alignment between their conscious mind and the divine intelligence that governs all life. This inner sanctuary doesn't require special admission, elaborate rituals, or years of study to access. You don't need to be particularly spiritual, religious, or even believe in God in any traditional sense. What you do need is pure attention and a willingness to live in harmony with the good that wants to express itself through you. Right now, at this very moment, there's a presence within you that knows exactly how to restore perfect order to every cell, every organ, every system in your body. The question isn't whether this power exists. The question is whether you're ready to discover how to activate it. If you're ready for more life-changing spiritual content like this, hit that subscribe button. I'm here to share practical truths that actually transform your daily experience. And here's where this journey gets truly transformative, because once you understand what's really happening behind the scenes of your physical experience, everything changes. You see, what most people call sickness or disease isn't actually some mysterious force attacking your body from the outside, nor is it punishment from an angry universe keeping score of your mistakes. The hidden truth is far more empowering than that. Every condition, every symptom, every physical challenge you've ever experienced is simply a reflection, like looking in a mirror, of beliefs you've been carrying around, often without even realizing it. These aren't just surface-level thoughts you think once and forget. We're talking about deep, sustained patterns of belief that have been reinforced over time through repetition, emotion, and acceptance. Think about the power of this revelation for a moment. If your body is reflecting your inner beliefs, then changing those beliefs literally changes what your body expresses. This isn't positive thinking or denial of reality. This is understanding how the fundamental mechanism of creation actually works in your life. But here's what makes this even more fascinating: the specific nature of your beliefs determines the exact type of experience you create. When you operate from a mindset of separation, believing you're disconnected from the source of life, isolated and vulnerable, your body responds by creating dysfunction and disorder. When scarcity dominates your thinking, when you're constantly worried about not having enough, not being enough, not doing enough, that tension becomes a living reality in your nervous system, your muscles, your entire physical experience. Perhaps most surprisingly, when you unconsciously give power to negative forces, whether you call them stress, fear, anxiety, or anything else, your body literally contracts in response. It's as if every cell receives the message that it needs to defend itself against some imaginary threat. But here's the incredible flip side of this spiritual equation. When you shift your fundamental belief system to recognize God as the very essence of life itself, as infinite intelligence operating through you, as absolute love that knows no limits or conditions, something remarkable happens. Your body begins to reorganize itself around order instead of chaos. Your mind experiences clarity where there was once confusion. Even your environment starts reflecting a peace that you might have thought was impossible. This transformation isn't gradual or partial. It's a complete reversal of cause and effect. Most people have been taught to believe that external circumstances create internal states, but the spiritual laws governing health work in exactly the opposite direction. Your internal landscape of belief, sustained with emotional conviction, becomes the blueprint that your physical reality follows with mathematical precision. The impact of this understanding extends far beyond just physical healing. When you truly grasp that your beliefs are the primary creative force in your experience, you realize that you've been walking around with the power to transform your entire life, and you just didn't know how to access it. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because there's a specific process for shifting these fundamental beliefs that most people completely miss. The difference between someone who experiences lasting transformation and someone who remains stuck isn't about willpower, education, or even spiritual practice. It's about understanding the precise mechanism through which beliefs actually change at the deepest level. Write in the comments, "I'm ready for this transformation," if this is starting to make sense to you. The beautiful thing about this approach is that it doesn't require you to become some kind of spiritual superhuman or master complex metaphysical formulas. Behind the scenes of every genuine transformation, there's actually a surprisingly simple process at work. This isn't about magic tricks or secret techniques that only a chosen few can access. What we're talking about is spiritual truth applied with elegant simplicity, and once you understand the mechanics, you'll wonder why nobody ever explained it this way before. The first crucial shift in your mindset happens when you learn to redirect your attention. Most people have been conditioned to focus intensely on their problems, analyzing every symptom, researching every possible cause, discussing every detail with anyone who will listen. But this constant attention on what's wrong actually feeds the very thing you're trying to eliminate. It's like watering weeds while wondering why your garden won't flourish. The alternative is to deliberately turn your attention toward the source of all life, toward that divine intelligence we've been discussing. This isn't denial or pretending problems don't exist. It's understanding that your attention is creative energy, and wherever you direct it consistently, that's what expands in your experience. There's also this fascinating concept of building what's called a mental equivalent of health. Think of it like creating a detailed blueprint in your mind of what perfect wellness looks like and feels like for you specifically. Not some generic idea of health, but your personal vision of vitality, energy, peace, and strength. This mental equivalent becomes the template that your physical reality gradually reorganizes itself to match. But here's where most people get stuck in their journey. They build the mental equivalent, they redirect their attention, and then they immediately start complaining when they don't see instant results. Complaining is like taking that beautiful blueprint you've created and covering it with mud. Instead, the practice becomes one of blessing. Blessing your body, blessing the process, blessing even the smallest signs of progress, blessing the intelligence that's working behind the scenes even when you can't see it yet. This brings us to one of the most profound revelations about how this spiritual law actually operates. When you look at the healing stories in the Gospels, something extraordinary becomes clear. Every single healing that Jesus performed wasn't a supernatural exception to natural law. It was a perfect demonstration of spiritual law in action. He never asked people to prove they deserved healing. He never examined their past mistakes or required them to understand complex theological concepts. He never established conditions or prerequisites. The impact of this understanding is staggering because it means that same law, that same power, that same possibility exists within you right now. Jesus wasn't operating from some special divine privilege that's unavailable to everyone else. He was demonstrating what becomes possible when a human consciousness aligns completely with the truth of what we actually are. He simply recognized and manifested the kingdom that already existed within each person who came to him. Not the kingdom as some distant reward in an afterlife, but the kingdom as a present reality, a current state of divine order that's always available when we know how to access it. If these truths stirred something within you, that like button lets me know this message hit home. Your response helps me understand what resonates with hearts like yours. The decisions these people made weren't complicated. They simply accepted what was being offered to them in that moment. They didn't argue about whether they were worthy, didn't analyze how it was possible, didn't demand to understand the mechanism before they would receive the benefit. Write in the comments, "I accept this truth," if you're beginning to see how this same law can work in your life. What makes this even more extraordinary is understanding exactly what you are in this spiritual equation. There's a passage that asks, "Do you not know that you are God's temple and that God's Spirit dwells in you?" Now, most people hear this as beautiful, religious poetry, something inspiring to contemplate during quiet moments. But the hidden truth is that this isn't metaphorical language at all. This is describing the actual metaphysical and spiritual reality of your existence. This revelation completely transforms how you think about your relationship with your body. You see, you don't actually possess a body the way you might own a car or a house. You live in your body, and here's what's happening behind the scenes that changes everything. Your consciousness is what sustains its form, its strength, and its function. Your body isn't running on autopilot according to some predetermined genetic program. It's constantly responding to the quality and content of your awareness. Think about the profound impact of this understanding. Every single thing you believe, every emotion you feel regularly, every fear you entertain, every love you embrace, everything you accept as true about yourself and life, everything you reject or resist. All of this becomes the invisible blueprint that your flesh follows with incredible precision. This isn't some abstract spiritual concept. This is practical biology operating according to spiritual law. There are literally no diseases that exist without corresponding thoughts that preceded them. No disorders appear in your body without ideas that came first. No pain manifests without a mental cause that created the conditions for it to express. The journey of transformation begins when you realize that your body has been your most faithful servant all along. It never disobeys you, it only obeys. When you hold thoughts of weakness, it expresses weakness. When you sustain feelings of tension, it manifests tension. When you repeatedly focus on limitation, it demonstrates limitation. But here's the empowering flip side. When you consciously choose thoughts of vitality, it responds with vitality. When you maintain feelings of peace, it expresses peace. When you focus on wholeness, it moves toward wholeness. This is why the decisions you make about what to think, what to believe, what to accept as true about yourself are so incredibly powerful. Your consciousness isn't just observing your body, it's actively creating your bodily experience moment by moment through the quality of attention you're giving to different possibilities. Most people have been making these decisions unconsciously, inherited from family patterns, cultural conditioning, past experiences, and random influences. But once you understand the mechanism, you can begin making these choices deliberately. You can start selecting thoughts that serve your highest good instead of just accepting whatever mental content happens to drift through your awareness. The beautiful thing about this process is that your body wants to reflect health, vitality, and perfect function. That's its natural inclination when consciousness is clear and aligned. Disease and dysfunction aren't natural states. They're distortions that occur when consciousness is clouded by limiting beliefs, sustained stress, or emotional patterns that don't serve life. But here's what's truly remarkable about this spiritual law. The moment you begin shifting your internal landscape, your body immediately begins responding to that shift. It doesn't wait for you to perfect your thinking or completely eliminate every limiting belief. It starts reorganizing itself around whatever new patterns you're establishing, even if you're just beginning this journey. Write in the comments, "My body reflects my consciousness," if you're starting to see how powerful this connection really is. Now here's where most people make a critical mistake in their journey toward transformation. When symptoms appear, when discomfort arises, when something feels off in their body, the automatic response is to declare war on the symptom itself. They focus all their energy on fighting what they don't want, battling the physical manifestation, trying to force their body into submission through sheer willpower or aggressive interventions. But this approach completely misses the hidden truth about how healing actually works. The symptom is never the real problem. It's just the messenger. Fighting the symptom is like getting angry at your car's dashboard when the oil light comes on, instead of addressing the actual oil level. The body is never the source of the problem. It's simply the stage where your secretly held beliefs are being represented in physical form. Real transformation happens when you shift your focus entirely. Instead of battling the effect, you recognize and eliminate the mental cause that originated the physical expression. This requires a completely different mindset, one that looks beyond the obvious, to discover what patterns of thought, what sustained emotions, what deep-seated beliefs have been creating the conditions for this particular manifestation. This channel exists to bring you profound spiritual insights that work in real life. Subscribe so you never miss the keys to transformation that could change everything for you. The impact of this approach is profound because it addresses the root rather than just managing the branches. When you eliminate the mental cause, the effect naturally dissolves, not through force but through the restoration of natural order. It's like cleaning the lens of a projector. Suddenly the image on the screen becomes clear, not because you scrubbed the screen, but because you addressed what was creating the distortion. But there's another aspect of this transformation that's even more powerful, and it has to do with the words you speak about your body every single day. Think about this revelation. If you truly understood that you are God's temple, that divine spirit actually dwells within you, would you ever speak badly about your body? Would you call it names, criticize its appearance, complain about its limitations, or treat it like an enemy? That's working against you. The decisions you make about how to speak about your body are creating your bodily experience in ways most people never realize. Behind the scenes of your physical reality, there's this incredible spiritual law at work. Every word you affirm with genuine feeling and conviction becomes a prayer. Not just the words you speak in formal prayer or meditation, but every emotionally charged statement you make about yourself, your health, your capabilities, your limitations. This means that when someone habitually says things like "my bad back," "my weak immune system," "my chronic condition," or "my family's genetic problems," They're literally praying for those conditions to continue and strengthen. They're sowing seeds in the fertile ground of consciousness, and spiritual law ensures that whatever seeds are planted with emotion and repetition will eventually produce a harvest. The journey toward lasting wellness requires becoming conscious of this constant conversation you're having with yourself and about yourself. Every complaint is a negative affirmation. Every criticism of your body is a prayer for limitation. Every fearful statement about your health is an investment in the very future you're trying to avoid. But when you begin speaking to your body with reverence, with gratitude, with recognition of its divine nature, something extraordinary starts happening. You begin sowing different seeds, planting expectations of harmony, vitality, and perfect function. Write in the comments, "I choose my words carefully," if you're ready to transform how you speak about your body. This brings us to one of the most counterintuitive revelations in this entire journey of transformation. When most people want to improve their health, they naturally focus all their attention on the body itself. They research supplements, try different diets, experiment with exercise routines, visit various practitioners, and essentially make the body the center of their healing strategy. But there's a hidden truth that completely reverses this approach and makes everything infinitely more effective. If you truly want health, don't seek it in the body. Seek God instead. Now, before your mind jumps to religious associations or theological debates, understand that this isn't about denomination or doctrine. This is about recognizing the source of life itself and aligning with that source rather than trying to manipulate the effect while ignoring the cause. When you find God and recognize divine presence within you as the very essence of life, health doesn't have to be pursued, begged for, or struggled toward. It emerges as an inevitable consequence through spiritual law, the same way light emerges when you flip a switch that connects to a power source. The impact of this shift in focus is extraordinary because you stop trying to fix what appears broken and start connecting with what was never broken to begin with. Most people spend their entire lives looking outward for this connection. They think they need to go to a church, climb a mountain, participate in elaborate rituals, or find some special sacred location where God might be more accessible. But here's what changes everything about your journey. God is within you right now, in that deep silence where truth speaks without words, without concepts, without any need for external validation or approval. This isn't mystical fantasy. This is practical spirituality that produces measurable results. When you begin to regularly recognize and acknowledge God's life within you, something remarkable happens behind the scenes of your physical experience. Your body literally begins to transform into what can only be described as light. Not metaphorically, but energetically, cellularly, systemically. The decisions you make about where to seek healing determine everything about what you'll experience. When you seek healing in treatments, methods, substances, or techniques, you're operating from the assumption that the power exists outside of you and that you need to find the right external intervention to fix your internal problem. This approach can sometimes provide temporary relief, but it doesn't address the fundamental source of vitality. But when you make the decision to seek God within yourself, you're accessing the infinite intelligence that created your body in the first place, the same intelligence that orchestrates your heartbeat, governs your breathing, coordinates millions of cellular functions every second without any conscious effort from you. This intelligence knows exactly how to restore perfect order to any system that's expressing dysfunction. The beauty of this approach is its simplicity. You don't need special training, expensive equipment, or years of preparation. You just need to be willing to turn your attention inward and recognize what's already there. In that deep inner silence, beyond the chatter of worry and analysis, beyond the noise of symptoms and diagnoses, there's a place where divine truth communicates directly with your soul. This recognition isn't intellectual understanding. It's experiential knowing that emerges when you stop talking and start listening, when you stop seeking and start being, when you stop trying to figure everything out and allow yourself to be guided from within. Write in the comments, "God is within me," if you're ready to discover this inner source of healing. But here's where the real transformation begins, and it's probably different from what you might expect. Once you recognize this divine presence within you, you can't just passively hope that something will eventually happen. There's a specific practice that activates this spiritual law, and it requires you to step into a completely different relationship with truth itself. You must learn to declare with genuine authority, "God's life animates every cell of my body. I am a living temple of the Spirit. Good dwells in me, and there is no place for evil." Now, the first time you say these words, your logical mind will probably protest. It might point to symptoms, past diagnoses, or current discomfort as evidence that these statements aren't true. But here's the hidden truth that changes everything about how this process works. You don't wait for evidence to declare truth. You declare truth, and then evidence comes to match what you've declared. This is the complete opposite of how most people approach their healing journey. They want to see improvement first, then they'll believe. They want proof before they'll have faith. They want the symptoms to disappear before they'll declare wellness. But spiritual law operates in reverse. The declaration of truth, made with authority and conviction, creates the conditions for that truth to manifest in physical form. It's like planting a seed. You don't wait for the plant to grow before you plant the seed. You plant the seed with confidence that it contains everything necessary to become what it's designed to be. The decisions you make about when and how to declare these truths determine the speed and completeness of your transformation. When you declare them tentatively, hoping they might be true, you're sowing weak seeds. When you declare them with authority, knowing they represent the deepest reality of your being, you're sowing with the power that creates worlds. This brings us to one of the most challenging aspects of this entire journey, and it's where most people unknowingly sabotage their own progress. There is absolutely no healing without faith, and there is no faith without consistent practice. But here's what trips people up. You cannot expect genuine changes while simultaneously continuing to watch symptoms like a hawk, talking about them in detail, measuring their intensity, or discussing them extensively with others. When content touches your spirit like this, hitting like is your way of saying yes to truth and transformation. It means more than you know. Every time you focus intently on what's wrong, you're actually feeding energy into the very condition you're trying to eliminate. It's like trying to grow a beautiful garden while spending all your time watering the weeds and discussing how terrible they look with everyone who visits. Your attention is creative force, and wherever you direct it, consistently, is what expands in your experience. The impact of symptom watching goes far beyond just psychological effects. When you're constantly monitoring, measuring, and analyzing physical discomfort, you're training your nervous system to become hypersensitive to every fluctuation, every sensation, every minor change. You're programming your subconscious mind to expect problems and to search for evidence that confirms your fears. Instead, the practice becomes one of focusing on God to dissolve symptoms, not fighting them, not analyzing them, not trying to understand their every nuance, but simply redirecting your attention to the source of all healing. When you focus on divine presence, on infinite intelligence, on perfect love expressing through you, symptoms begin to lose their grip on your consciousness. Write in the comments, "I declare divine truth," if you're ready to practice this authoritative approach to healing. This is where everything we've been discussing starts to come together in a practical way that can completely revolutionize your daily experience. The fundamental shift that creates lasting transformation isn't about learning to control your body more effectively. You don't heal by trying to force your physical system into compliance through willpower or by micromanaging every biological process. The real change happens when you understand that healing is actually about re-educating your mind. Think about the profound impact of this revelation. Your body has been responding perfectly to the education it's been receiving from your thoughts, emotions, and beliefs. If it's expressing dysfunction, limitation, or discomfort, it's simply demonstrating what it's been taught through repetitive mental patterns. The journey toward wellness becomes one of becoming a better teacher to your own system. But here's where most people get trapped in counterproductive patterns. They spend enormous amounts of mental energy fearing evil, trying to protect themselves from negative influences, worrying about what might go wrong, analyzing every possible threat to their well-being. This approach actually strengthens exactly what they're trying to avoid, because fear is a powerful form of focused attention, and attention feeds whatever it touches. The hidden truth behind effective healing is that you don't heal by fearing evil, you heal by affirming good. Instead of trying to build walls against what you don't want, you open doors to what you do want. Instead of defending against disease, you invite wellness. Instead of fighting symptoms, you cultivate harmony. This shift in mindset changes everything about how your nervous system operates and how your body responds to stress. Similarly, you don't heal by endlessly analyzing symptoms, tracking their patterns, researching their possible meanings, or discussing their implications. This kind of analytical approach keeps you trapped in the problem rather than connected to the solution. The alternative is contemplating presence, regularly turning your attention to the divine intelligence that's always working to restore perfect order in every aspect of your being. Now, here's a practical way to implement this understanding that can begin transforming your experience immediately. Establish daily moments of silence, not long, complicated meditation sessions, but simple, accessible periods of inner connection. These don't need to be formal or elaborate. Even 5 minutes in the morning, a brief pause at midday, and a few moments before sleep can create profound shifts in your overall state of being. During these moments of silence, close your eyes, breathe serenely, and speak these words with genuine feeling. I am in God, and God is in me. Divine life flows in every part of my being. I am in order. I am in peace. I am in health. Don't just recite these words mechanically. Feel their meaning. Allow their truth to penetrate deeper than intellectual understanding into the very core of your being. The decisions you make about establishing this daily practice determine whether these spiritual principles remain interesting concepts or become living realities that reshape your physical experience. When you create these regular touch points with divine presence, you're essentially tuning your consciousness to a different frequency, one that naturally harmonizes with health, peace, and vitality. Behind the scenes of this simple practice, something remarkable begins happening. Your body starts receiving different instructions from your consciousness. Instead of messages of worry, limitation, and fear, it begins receiving messages of order, peace, and perfect function. Write in the comments, I choose daily silence, if you're ready to establish this transformative practice in your life. The more you practice this daily silence, the more you begin to understand something profound about how transformation actually works at the deepest level. There's an ancient wisdom that says, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. And this isn't talking about casual, surface-level thoughts that drift through your mind throughout the day. This is referring to the deep, sustained patterns of belief that exist at the heart level of your consciousness. The hidden truth about lasting transformation is that health operates as law. It's the natural state of every being created in God's image. This isn't wishful thinking or spiritual idealism. This is the fundamental principle underlying all physical existence. When you truly understand this, you realize that disease isn't natural, normal, or inevitable. It's actually an aberration that occurs when consciousness becomes disconnected from its source. What appears in your flesh was first accepted in your mind through deep, heart-level belief. Not the beliefs you think you should have, not the beliefs you intellectually agree with, but the beliefs you actually carry at the emotional core of your being. These are the beliefs that have been reinforced through repetition, charged with emotion, and accepted as truth at such a deep level that they operate automatically below the threshold of conscious awareness. The journey toward understanding this connection between consciousness and physical reality reveals something remarkable about how precisely your body reflects your inner landscape. Bodies literally reflect ideas with mathematical accuracy. When you examine the patterns behind various physical conditions, you begin to see the incredible intelligence of this mind-body connection. Where there was sustained fear in someone's emotional pattern, the body responded with contraction, muscles tightening, breathing becoming shallow, circulation restricting. Where there was deep-seated guilt, the body manifested pressure, blood pressure issues, headaches, feelings of heaviness and burden. Where there was chronic resentment, the body created inflammation, joints swelling, tissues becoming irritated, systems becoming hypersensitive and reactive. This isn't metaphorical language. This is practical physiology operating according to spiritual law. Your body obeys what you believe at the deepest level, what you fear repeatedly, and what you emotionally sustain over time. It's not responding to what you say you believe or what you think you should feel. It's responding to the actual energetic and emotional atmosphere you're creating through your consistent internal patterns. The impact of recognizing this connection is extraordinary because it means you have far more influence over your physical experience than you might have realized. Those decisions you make about what emotional states to cultivate, what thoughts to entertain regularly, what beliefs to accept as true about yourself, these aren't just mental exercises. They're literally programming instructions for your physical system. Behind the scenes of every symptom, every condition, every area of physical challenge, there's a corresponding pattern of consciousness that has been creating the perfect conditions for that particular manifestation. This doesn't mean you're to blame for your health challenges. It means you have access to the actual mechanism of change. When someone begins to shift their emotional patterns, when they start releasing long-held resentments, when they begin to replace fear with trust, when they dissolve guilt through genuine forgiveness, the body immediately begins reflecting these new patterns. Write in the comments, "My body reflects my beliefs," if you're beginning to see this powerful connection between your inner world and your physical experience. This understanding completely revolutionizes how you approach the entire healing process, because now you realize that true healing doesn't come from trying to force your body to be healthy through external interventions, supplements, or aggressive treatments. Real transformation happens when you focus on straightening your thought patterns, aligning your consciousness with divine truth, and re-educating your heart to think with God rather than with limitation, fear, or past conditioning. The decisions you make about where to direct your healing efforts determine everything about your results. Most people exhaust themselves fighting against symptoms, battling diseases, warring with their bodies as if physical manifestations were the enemy. But here's the hidden truth that changes your entire approach. You don't fight against evil, you deny it with meekness. Denying with meekness doesn't mean pretending problems don't exist, or trying to convince yourself that everything is fine when it clearly isn't. It means recognizing that whatever appears to be wrong has no real power, no ultimate authority, no permanent reality. It means refusing to give your creative energy to sustaining patterns that don't serve your highest good, while maintaining a gentle, non-resistant attitude that doesn't create additional tension in your system. This brings us to one of the most practical and powerful aspects of this entire journey of transformation. Behind the scenes of every positive change in your life, there's a spiritual principle operating that most people never understand. Nothing can manifest in your physical experience without first existing as its equivalent in your mind. Think about the profound impact of this revelation. If you desire health, you must form a clear, serene, firm mental image of what health actually means to you personally. Not some vague hope that symptoms will disappear, not some generic idea of feeling better, but a specific, detailed, emotionally rich picture of what vibrant wellness looks and feels like in your unique life. Most people skip this crucial step entirely. They know what they don't want: pain, fatigue, limitation, discomfort. But they've never taken the time to consciously create a compelling vision of what they do want. They're trying to manifest something they've never clearly defined, and then they wonder why their results are inconsistent or temporary. The process of building this mental equivalent isn't just visualization or positive thinking. It's about creating a detailed blueprint that your consciousness can use as a template for reorganizing your physical reality. This means spending time regularly imagining how you would move through your day if you felt completely healthy. How would you wake up? How would you breathe? What would your energy level be like? How would you interact with others? What activities would you engage in? With enthusiasm, this mental equivalent becomes the invisible architect of your healing journey. Your subconscious mind uses this blueprint to coordinate all the complex biological processes necessary to manifest what you've clearly defined. But here's what makes this even more powerful. Nothing arrives in your experience without mental correspondence, which means that if you can't hold a clear image of health in your mind, you literally cannot experience it in your body. The beauty of this principle is that once you understand it, you realize you have complete creative control over what you're manifesting. You're not at the mercy of random biological processes or genetic predispositions. Write in the comments, "I create my mental equivalent," if you're ready to consciously design the blueprint for your healing transformation. You're absolutely right to focus on creating that mental equivalent. But here's where this journey takes an even more personal and powerful turn. The process of transformation requires you to discover and define what being healthy means to you specifically. Not what health looks like in medical textbooks, not what wellness means to your family, not what vitality looks like in social media posts, but what radiant health would actually feel like in your unique life circumstances. This is crucial because the Holy Spirit doesn't impose forms on your healing journey. Divine intelligence doesn't decide for you what your perfect health should look like or how it should manifest. Instead, spiritual life awaits your mental mold, your personal template, your individual vision of what wholeness means for you. Light enters through the opening you create, not through openings that others create for you. The decisions you make about how specifically to define your health vision determine the precision with which spiritual law can work in your life. When your vision is vague, the results are vague. When your vision is detailed, emotionally rich, and personally meaningful, the manifestation process becomes incredibly focused and effective. But here's a hidden obstacle that stops most people from experiencing the full impact of this spiritual healing process, and it's something that operates completely behind the scenes of conscious awareness. Even if you create the most perfect mental equivalent of health, even if you practice daily silence and declare divine truth with authority, there's one internal condition that can block everything: harboring resentment in your heart. The heart that harbors resentment simply cannot shelter peace, and without peace flowing through your emotional system, there is no sustainable health. This isn't a moral judgment or spiritual punishment. This is practical, spiritual physiology. Unforgiveness acts as an invisible retention force that literally ties your soul to memories of past hurts, disappointments, betrayals, and injustices. These retained emotional patterns don't just stay quietly in your memory banks. They actively seek expression through your physical system, creating mental confusion, emotional turbulence, and bodily disease. The resentment you're carrying toward your ex-spouse, your difficult parent, your former business partner, your childhood bully, even toward yourself for past mistakes. All of this unexpressed emotional charge is circulating through your consciousness and affecting every cell in your body. The journey toward complete healing requires addressing these deeper emotional patterns with the same intentionality you bring to creating positive mental equivalents. You can't just overlay healthy thinking on top of an emotionally congested system and expect lasting results. The foundation has to be cleared first. This revelation often surprises people because they've been focusing so intently on physical healing that they haven't considered how their relationship patterns, their emotional history, their unresolved conflicts might be directly connected to their health challenges. But when you understand that consciousness creates physical reality, it becomes obvious that emotional peace is not separate from physical wellness. It's foundational to it. The most beautiful aspect of this understanding is that forgiveness isn't something you do for other people. Forgiveness is something you do for yourself, to free your own creative energy from being trapped in past scenarios that no longer serve your highest good. Write in the comments, "I release all resentment," if you're ready to clear the emotional foundation for your complete healing transformation. When most people think about forgiveness, they imagine it means saying the other person was right, accepting injustice as somehow good, or resigning themselves to being a victim of circumstances beyond their control. But this understanding actually keeps you trapped in the very suffering you're trying to escape. True forgiveness is something completely different and far more empowering. Forgiveness is understanding that everything happening in the external plane, every difficult relationship, every painful experience, every challenging circumstance, is actually an opportunity to choose anew, not to choose the same reactive patterns you've always chosen, not to choose resentment or victimhood or powerlessness, but to choose your response from a higher level of consciousness than the one that originally created the problem. This perspective completely transforms your relationship with difficult experiences because you realize that forgiveness isn't about condoning bad behavior or pretending that harmful actions don't matter. Forgiveness is about releasing your soul from the invisible bonds that keep you energetically tied to past suffering. It's about making decisions that serve your freedom rather than perpetuating your imprisonment. The impact of this shift extends far beyond just feeling better emotionally. When you release these energetic bonds, through genuine forgiveness, you literally free up creative life force that was being used to sustain old patterns of resentment, and that energy becomes available for healing, for manifestation, for transformation in every area of your life. But here's where this journey takes an incredibly practical turn that affects you every single day, often without you realizing it. The decisions you make about how to speak, what words to use, what phrases to repeat throughout your day are actually determining your future experiences in ways that most people never understand. Words are seeds, causes, prayers. This isn't metaphorical language. This is describing the actual creative mechanism through which your spoken language shapes your reality. Every phrase you pronounce that's charged with emotion and belief plants a literal seed in your mental field, and that seed will eventually produce fruit according to its exact nature. Think about the hidden truth behind this principle. You cannot sow fear words and harvest peace. You cannot plant phrases of limitation and expect a crop of abundance. You cannot water your consciousness with complaints and criticism and then wonder why joy doesn't flourish in your life experience. Behind the scenes of your daily conversations, there's this constant seeding process happening. When you say things like, "I'm always getting sick," "My family has bad genes," "I can't afford that," "Nothing ever works out for me," or "I'm just not that kind of person," you're literally programming your subconscious mind to create more evidence that supports these statements. Your subconscious doesn't argue with what you tell it repeatedly with emotional conviction. It simply accepts your words as instructions and begins coordinating circumstances, opportunities, and even biological processes to match what you've declared to be true about yourself and your life. The revelation that changes everything is recognizing that this creative power of language works both ways. When you begin speaking words of health, abundance, peace, love, and possibility with the same emotional conviction, your subconscious mind begins creating evidence to support these declarations instead. This means that every conversation becomes an opportunity to sow seeds for the kind of future you actually want to experience. Write in the comments, "My words create my reality," if you're beginning to understand the creative power of your daily language. This understanding about the creative power of words reveals something even deeper about how you're either nourishing or poisoning your entire system every single day. The bread that truly sustains you isn't just the physical food you put in your mouth 3 times a day. The real nourishment that determines your vitality, your strength, your resilience, comes from the words that feed your consciousness throughout each day. Think about this hidden truth that most people never consider. You might know someone who eats nutritious meals, takes vitamins, follows a perfect diet, yet they seem to weaken over time, become more anxious, more prone to illness, more depleted. Meanwhile, you might know others who don't pay much attention to their physical diet, but radiate energy and wellness. The difference often comes down to what kind of mental and emotional diet they're consuming through their language patterns. Many people are literally starving their consciousness while feeding their bodies. They eat 3 healthy meals a day, but spend those same meals complaining about their work, worrying about their finances, criticizing their relationships, rehearsing their problems, and analyzing their symptoms. They're consuming phrases of worry and complaint instead of living words that actually nourish the soul. The decisions you make about what kind of verbal diet to maintain determine whether your words become medicine or poison in your system. When you speak words of gratitude, appreciation, faith, hope, and possibility, you're feeding your consciousness with nutrients that strengthen every aspect of your being. When you speak words of fear, doubt, criticism, and limitation, you're essentially consuming toxins that weaken your entire system from the inside out. This brings us to one of the most profound revelations about how transformation actually works, and it comes from understanding the deeper meaning behind the healing stories that have been inspiring people for thousands of years. Every healing recorded in the Gospels isn't simply historical fact about miraculous events that happened in the distant past. These accounts are spiritual law in action, demonstrating principles that are still operating today with the same precision and power. The impact of this understanding is extraordinary because it means that each healing story, when read with spiritual insight, becomes an internal blueprint, a living instruction manual, a reproducible model for any soul who decides to place genuine faith in God's presence rather than in limitation, circumstance, or physical appearance. Behind the scenes of each miraculous healing, there was always the same fundamental process at work. Someone made a decision to look beyond what appeared to be true to what was actually true. They shifted their attention from the problem to the presence. They moved from fear to faith, from doubt to certainty, from analyzing symptoms to recognizing the infinite intelligence that was always available to restore perfect order. The journey toward your own transformation becomes much clearer when you realize that these weren't special people with unique spiritual privileges. They were ordinary individuals who understood how to align their consciousness with spiritual law. The woman who touched the hem of Jesus' garment had the same access to divine healing that you have right now. The centurion who asked for his servant to be healed was working with the same spiritual principles that are available to you today. What made their healing possible wasn't their worthiness, their understanding, or their spiritual development. What made their healing possible was their willingness to believe that something greater than their circumstances was operating in their lives. Write in the comments, "I believe in divine healing," if you're ready to apply these same spiritual laws that have been working throughout history. The willingness to believe is just the beginning, but there's something much more precise and powerful happening when real transformation occurs. Faith isn't just a positive mental attitude or an optimistic emotion that you try to generate when you're facing challenges. True faith is actually interior contact with divine presence, not an isolated thought floating around in your head, not an emotional state you try to maintain, but an actual act of alignment between your soul and God. This distinction changes everything about how you approach your healing journey, because it means faith isn't something you have to work up or manufacture. Faith is something that emerges naturally when you make genuine contact with the source of all life within yourself. When this alignment occurs, even for just a second, healing happens immediately because the healing was already contained in spiritual order, waiting for the moment of connection to activate it. The decisions you make about how to establish this interior contact determine whether your faith becomes a struggling effort or a natural recognition. Most people try to believe their way into healing, using willpower to overcome doubt, forcing themselves to feel positive while their circumstances seem negative. But real faith works in the opposite direction. It flows from contact, not toward contact. This brings us to one of the most practical examples of how spiritual authority actually operates, found in the story of the centurion who approached Jesus about his sick servant. This wasn't a religious person, wasn't someone with theological training, wasn't even part of the spiritual community. He was a military officer who understood something profound about how authority works. The centurion understood that true authority doesn't shout, doesn't repeat itself endlessly, doesn't argue with opposition, and certainly doesn't doubt its own power. True authority simply declares. It speaks once with complete confidence and expects the declaration to be fulfilled, not because it's loud or forceful, but because it's aligned with truth. Behind the scenes of this understanding is a revelation that can completely transform how you use spiritual principles in your own life. A word charged with genuine faith isn't just sound waves moving through the air. It's action, it's cause, it's decree. When you declare God's life works in me, with true certainty, not hoping it might be true, not wishing it could be true, but knowing it is true, that word doesn't just express your belief, it acts and transforms. The impact of understanding this level of spiritual authority extends far beyond healing into every area of your life. When you speak from this place of interior contact, your words carry the power of the infinite intelligence that created and sustains all life. Your declarations aren't requests that might be granted. They're recognitions of what already exists in spiritual reality, waiting to manifest in physical form. This is why the centurion's healing request was so immediately effective. He wasn't begging, pleading, or trying to convince anyone of anything. He was simply recognizing divine authority and requesting that it be expressed in his particular situation. He spoke from alignment, and alignment always produces results. Now I want to go deeper into how you can cultivate this same kind of spiritual authority in your daily practice, because understanding the principle is only the beginning. Write in the comments, "I speak with divine authority," if you're ready to discover how to make your words carry the power of spiritual law. Cultivating this spiritual authority begins with understanding something that most people completely misunderstand about the nature of peace itself. When you think about peace, you might imagine it as a luxury reserved for contemplative souls who have withdrawn from the challenges of daily life, sitting in meditation while the world continues its chaotic pace around them. But this perception keeps you from accessing one of the most powerful forces available for transformation. True peace is not a luxury, it's an active spiritual function. It's living, concrete energy that operates with tremendous power when you allow it to work through your consciousness and your circumstances. Peace isn't the absence of conflict, challenge, or difficulty. Peace is the presence of God actively operating in your awareness, bringing divine order to whatever situation you're facing. The hidden truth that changes everything about how you approach both healing and life in general is that peace isn't world evasion, it's interior conquest. When you establish genuine peace within yourself, you're not running away from problems or pretending they don't exist. You're accessing the one power that can actually solve problems from their root cause, rather than just managing their symptoms. This understanding completely transforms your strategy for dealing with health challenges, relationship difficulties, financial pressures, or any other area where you're seeking breakthrough. Instead of fighting, struggling, analyzing, and strategizing your way towards solutions, you learn to consent interiorly to the good that wants to manifest, and that consent naturally expresses itself as deep, unshakable peace. The decisions you make about whether to operate from peace or from agitation determine the entire quality of your life experience. When you choose agitation, worry, stress, and mental spinning as your default response to challenges, you're literally closing the channels through which divine intelligence could provide solutions, healing, and breakthrough. But when you choose peace as your foundational response, something remarkable begins happening behind the scenes. That interior consent to good, expressed as deep peace, opens channels through which health, clarity, strength, and solutions can flow with almost effortless grace. This isn't passive resignation or spiritual bypassing. This is recognizing that the greatest thing you can do for your body, your mind, and your entire life is to get your personal will, your emotional reactivity, and your mental interference out of the way so that infinite intelligence can work. The impact of this shift extends far beyond just feeling calmer or more relaxed. When you operate from genuine spiritual peace, your body's healing mechanisms function optimally because they're not being constantly disrupted by stress hormones and tension patterns. Your mental clarity increases dramatically because your thoughts aren't being clouded by emotional turbulence. Your intuitive guidance becomes much more accessible because you're not drowning out that still, small voice with the noise of worry and fear. Most importantly, solutions and opportunities that were always available but invisible to your stressed-out consciousness suddenly become obvious and accessible. This is why peace isn't just a nice feeling to cultivate. It's the optimal state of consciousness for manifesting positive change in any area of your life. Write in the comments, "I choose peace" first, if you're ready to make this the foundation of your entire approach to healing and transformation. When you make peace your foundational choice, you begin accessing something even more profound, the ability to speak from what can only be described as Christ consciousness. This isn't religious language, but practical spiritual terminology for that place within you, where divine intelligence and human awareness merge into perfect harmony. When you learn to speak from this internal Christ without fear, without endless discussion, without doubt clouding your declarations, something remarkable happens in your external circumstances. Storms calm. Not just metaphorical storms in your emotions or relationships, but actual disruption in your health, your finances, your family dynamics, your work environment. Whatever area has been chaotic begins to settle into natural order. The process of pacification begins the moment you stop speaking from your worried, analytical, problem-focused human mind and start speaking from the place within you that knows the truth, regardless of appearances. This shift happens because when your soul quiets into alignment with divine truth, your body automatically relaxes. And when your body relaxes, life's natural flow re-establishes itself throughout your entire system. The decisions you make about which voice to speak from, these The voice of fear or the voice of faith, the voice of limitation or the voice of infinite possibility literally determine what kind of reality you create around yourself. Behind the scenes of every miraculous transformation, someone has learned to consistently speak from this deeper place of knowing rather than from surface-level analysis of problems. This brings us to one of the most fundamental revelations about how lasting health actually works. Health is never the starting point. It's always the consequence. Health is like a flower sprouting from prepared soil, a visible effect of an invisible cause, and that invisible cause is divine order operating through your consciousness. Most people have this completely backwards. They try to create health directly through external interventions, assuming that the right combination of treatments, supplements, lifestyle changes, or medical procedures will eventually produce wellness. But this approach is like trying to force a flower to bloom by manipulating its petals instead of nurturing the soil and root system. Real health begins not in your body, not in your food choices, not in external medicines or treatments, but in your mind, specifically in how you organize your consciousness, your thoughts, your words, and your daily life. When divine order is established at the level of consciousness, health manifests naturally as the physical expression of that internal harmony. This understanding completely transforms your approach to wellness because you realize that every thought you think, every word you speak, every daily habit you maintain is either contributing to divine order or creating disorder in your system. The impact of organizing your consciousness around spiritual truth instead of around problems, fears, and limitations cannot be overstated. When your mental landscape reflects divine order, when your thoughts are aligned with truth, when your words express faith rather than fear, when your daily routines create space for spiritual connection, your body begins reflecting that same order through improved function, increased vitality, and natural healing processes that work more efficiently. Write in the comments, "Divine order governs my life," if you're beginning to see how foundational this principle is to creating lasting transformation in every area of your experience. This understanding about divine order operating through consciousness leads to something beautifully practical that can transform your daily experience immediately. The soul that genuinely desires lasting health must establish what can only be described as sober, simple, constant internal discipline. Not rigid rules that make life complicated, but elegant habits that naturally reflect God's presence in both small and great things throughout your day. Think about the profound impact of approaching your daily routines as opportunities to express divine order rather than just mundane tasks to get through. When you eat with genuine gratitude instead of mindless consumption, when you sleep with serenity instead of worry-filled tossing and turning, when you speak with measured wisdom instead of reactive emotion, when you work with purposeful intention instead of stressed obligation, when you pray with regular consistency instead of desperate occasional pleas, you're literally organizing your entire life around the presence of God. The decisions you make about these seemingly small daily habits create the atmosphere in which healing either flourishes or struggles to take root. Behind the scenes of every sustained transformation, there's always this foundation of simple spiritual discipline that creates fertile ground for miracles to manifest naturally. But here's where this journey takes an unexpected turn that reveals something extraordinary about the hidden power you carry to impact not just your own healing, but the healing of others. When you pray for someone else, what you're actually offering isn't simply your desire for their improvement or your hope that something good will happen to them. What you're offering is your mental image of who you believe that person truly is at their core. This revelation changes everything about how you approach intercessory prayer because it means your mental picture of the person you're praying for becomes the template that spiritual law uses to work in their life. If your image of them carries fear about their condition, worry about their future or focus on their symptoms and limitations, then despite your good intentions, the subconscious message you're transmitting remains contradictory and actually reinforces the very problems you're hoping to help resolve. The true power of prayer for others emerges when you learn to see them as God sees them, whole, perfect, radiant with divine life, expressing their highest potential regardless of what their current circumstances might suggest. This consecrated imagination isn't denial of their challenges. It's recognition of their spiritual reality that exists beyond temporary physical appearances. When you hold this elevated vision of another person consistently, you're literally lending them your faith when their own faith might be wavering. You're offering them the gift of being seen through the eyes of divine love rather than through the lens of human limitation. The impact of this kind of spiritual support cannot be measured, but it can be experienced both by you and by the person receiving this blessing. This practice of consecrated imagination extends your healing journey beyond personal transformation into becoming an agent of healing in the world around you. Write in the comments, "I see others through God's eyes," if you're ready to discover how your prayers can become powerful instruments of transformation for everyone in your life. When you become an instrument of transformation for others, there's a delicate balance that determines whether your spiritual support actually helps or inadvertently reinforces their challenges. True spiritual help means not denying someone's current experience or pretending their difficulties don't exist, but also not perpetuating those difficulties mentally by giving them more power and attention than they deserve. The decisions you make about how to respond when someone shares their struggles with you literally shape the spiritual atmosphere around that situation. When you listen with compassion but refuse to join them in analyzing every detail of their problems, when you acknowledge their experience without amplifying their fears, you're providing something invaluable. You're not denying attention to what they're going through, but you're denying power to the negative forces they're battling. Behind the scenes of this approach, you're not discussing what occurs in terms of giving it more reality and substance, but instead, you're affirming what is the spiritual truth about who this person really is. Beyond their temporary circumstances, you become a witness to truth rather than a collaborator in limitation, and this shift in your response can literally change the entire trajectory of their healing journey. This brings us to one of the most crucial aspects of your own transformation process that will determine whether you experience lasting breakthrough or get caught in cycles of temporary improvement followed by discouragement. The hidden truth about spiritual healing is that it's not linear like most people expect it to be. Sometimes your body delays, reflecting what has already occurred in your consciousness. You might have done all the spiritual work correctly, established genuine peace, declared truth with authority, forgiven everyone, and aligned your thinking with divine order. But the physical manifestation of that inner transformation doesn't appear immediately or consistently. This is where the journey becomes a test of your spiritual understanding versus your emotional reactions. If fear takes control during these apparent setbacks, if you allow doubt to creep back in when symptoms fluctuate, if you start questioning whether this spiritual approach really works when you don't see immediate physical evidence, the entire treatment process weakens because nothing is forced spiritually, but everything can be deactivated by fear. The impact of maintaining constancy during these fluctuations cannot be overstated. Your body might be going through necessary adjustment processes, releasing old patterns, or reorganizing itself at levels you can't perceive. But if you interpret every temporary discomfort as evidence that you're not healing, you interrupt the very process that was working behind the scenes. This is why spiritual healing requires a different kind of faith than most people understand. Not faith that something will happen in the future, but faith that something is happening right now, even when you can't see or feel the evidence yet. It's The willingness to trust divine intelligence over physical appearances, to believe in spiritual law over temporary circumstances. Now, I want to explore what maintains this constancy during challenging moments, because this is where most people either break through to permanent transformation or get stuck in endless cycles of hope and disappointment. Write in the comments, "I trust the process," if you're committed to maintaining faith even when the physical evidence doesn't immediately match your spiritual work. What maintains constancy during these challenging moments isn't what most people think it is. The secret lies in understanding that faith isn't an emotion you try to generate, not a mood you attempt to sustain, not a momentary enthusiasm that comes and goes with your circumstances. True faith is fidelity, the unwavering commitment to remaining united to truth when it's unseen, unfelt, and unconfirmed by external evidence. Think of it like a farmer who plants seeds in the spring. He doesn't dig them up every few days to check if they're growing. He doesn't lose faith when weeks pass without visible sprouts. He continues caring for the terrain, watering the soil, removing weeds, trusting that the natural laws of growth are operating beneath the surface, even when he can't see any evidence of progress. The decisions you make about whether to remain faithful to spiritual truth during these invisible growth periods determine everything about your ultimate results. Behind the scenes of every miraculous transformation, there's always this period of unseen development where spiritual law is reorganizing circumstances, relationships, and even biological processes to match the new consciousness you've established. Your job during these times isn't to figure out how the healing is going to happen, when it's going to be complete, or whether you're doing everything correctly. Your job is simply to maintain fidelity to the truth you've recognized about yourself and your divine nature, regardless of what temporary appearances might suggest. But here's where this journey reveals something even deeper about why some people experience complete, lasting transformation while others get caught in cycles of partial improvement. True health cannot flourish in a divided soul, a hardened heart, or a conflict-driven life. This revelation means that sustainable wellness requires much more than just working on physical symptoms or even just aligning your thoughts with spiritual truth. Real health includes necessary harmony with your entire environment, not having everything in your life perfectly resolved, not having every relationship smoothed out, not having every financial concern eliminated, but living from a peaceful center regardless of external circumstances. The impact of this understanding is profound because it means you can't compartmentalize your healing journey from the rest of your life experience. If you're doing all the right spiritual practices for your health, but simultaneously harboring resentment toward your family members, constantly stressed about your work situation, worried about your finances, or engaged in ongoing conflicts with neighbors or colleagues, those areas of disharmony create emotional and energetic disturbance that affects your entire system. The hidden truth about lasting wellness is that healing happens holistically, or it doesn't happen completely. Your body, your mind, your emotions, your relationships, your work, your finances, all of these areas are interconnected at the level of consciousness, and genuine peace in one area supports genuine peace in all areas. This doesn't mean you need to have a perfect life before you can experience perfect health. It means you need to approach all areas of your life from the same spiritual center, using the same principles of forgiveness, faith, divine order, and peaceful authority that you're applying to your healing journey. Write in the comments, "I seek harmony in all areas," if you're recognizing how interconnected every aspect of your life really is. When you begin recognizing how interconnected every aspect of your life really is, something beautiful begins to emerge that takes your transformation to an entirely different level. Most people think the spiritual path ends with healing, that once you've achieved the health, peace, or breakthrough you've been seeking, you've reached the finish line. But the hidden truth is exactly the opposite. The spiritual path begins truly with healing, not ends with it. Health isn't something you just receive and then protect like a treasure you might lose. Real health is something you live through daily practice and selfless service to others. This revelation changes everything about how you maintain and strengthen the transformation you've experienced, because it means your healing becomes a foundation for contribution rather than just a personal achievement. Behind the scenes of every person who experiences lasting, unshakable wellness, there's always this element of selfless service that removes them from the trap of self-enclosure. When you're constantly focused on your own symptoms, your own progress, your own challenges, you can actually create a kind of spiritual claustrophobia that limits the very healing you're trying to achieve. But when you begin serving others with genuine love and concern, something remarkable happens. You're reminded that you're not just a body trying to get healthy, you're a divine spark sharing yourself with the world. This shift in identity from someone who needs healing to someone who offers healing creates an entirely different energetic atmosphere around your life. The decisions you make about how to serve don't need to be dramatic or life-changing. Simple acts of kindness, listening with genuine presence when someone needs to talk, offering encouragement to those who are struggling, sharing what you've learned about spiritual, healing with others who might benefit, all of these become ways of expressing the divine life that's flowing through you. This brings us to the daily foundation that makes everything else we've discussed not just theoretical knowledge, but living reality. Walking in light means living from truth habitually, not just during your formal prayer times or when you're feeling spiritual, but as the consistent backdrop of your entire daily experience. It means awakening each morning with simple prayer that connects you to your source before you engage with any external demands or challenges. It means maintaining friendly thought vigilance during the day, not as rigid mental control, but as gentle awareness of where your attention is going and whether it's serving your highest good. It means sealing your nights with gratitude for what went well and forgiveness for what didn't, releasing the day completely so you can rest in peace. The impact of making these practices as natural and automatic as brushing your teeth cannot be overstated. This consistency creates permanent health through spiritual practice because you're no longer depending on willpower or motivation to stay connected to your spiritual center. You're living from that center as your normal way of being. Write in the comments, "I serve from my healing," if you're ready to discover how giving to others actually strengthens and stabilizes your own transformation. When you serve from your healing, when you live each day from this place of spiritual truth we've been exploring together, you become living proof that divine health isn't just a beautiful concept. It's a practical reality available to anyone willing to understand and apply these timeless principles. If you've stayed with me through this entire journey, you've received something that goes far beyond information. You've been given keys to transformation that can literally change every aspect of your life experience. The fact that you're still here, that you've absorbed these truths about divine healing, spiritual authority, and the power of consciousness to create physical reality, that tells me something important about who you are and what you're ready for. This channel exists to bring you exactly this kind of life-changing content, practical spirituality that produces real results in your health, your relationships, your peace of mind, and your ability to serve others from a place of authentic strength. If these insights have resonated with you, if they've shifted something in your understanding or given you hope for breakthrough you've been seeking, I'd love for you to subscribe so we can continue this journey together. And if you made it all the way to the end of this video, leave me a comment that says, "Divine health is my natural state," so I know you received the complete message. Your engagement lets me know that this content is making the difference it's meant to make. The like button is right there too, and honestly, after the connection we've built through these profound truths, it would mean a lot to know this message reached your heart, not just your mind. There's a video right here that takes these principles even deeper into practical daily application. Click and continue with me over there, because what we've started today is just the beginning of discovering what becomes possible when you truly understand your divine nature.